Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. And if you're here for the first time, and even if you're a recurring viewer, I would like to let you know that the channel is technically dead. I'm not really doing much with the channel. The idea is initially I had planned I would do a lot of videos on teaching people how to create voice assistants and all that stuff because I was really into them back in the day. But the truth is, life hits you, and then you really don't have time for side activities like these. Um, so the truth is, you can consider this channel to be dead, or I'm just gonna spend some time posting videos randomly on this channel just to document a few things. Um, and yeah, I thought of just uploading a video to my channel because I saw one old video from my channel, and the idea was like, um, so way back 8 years ago, I created a video called okay, what's the video called? Let me just open up the video. It was called, yeah, C Sharp Tutorial One Variable Variables. Okay, and the idea is, so I was going to say, I thought that I would teach people how to code and stuff like that. C Sharp was what I was previously using as my primary language because when I first started coding, there was a person named Michael Wilson, and Michael Wilson created something called Jarvis, and how that works, what that was, and all that. We can get into that later. Or maybe if someone asks me, maybe I can do that. Okay, let me just fix my working area. Actually, it's kind of a little messy. Yeah. Okay. So Michael Wilson used to use um. So he used to use C Sharp to create something called Jarvis, which is like a voice recognition software, like kind of given from the name. Yeah, so kind of inspired from the Iron Man movie, stuff like that. So I started copying his code. So that's the most important part. I used to copy his code, hence I had no understanding of my own. And that, based on the fact that I could run applications just by copying codes from other people, I thought that I can create tutorial videos on how things work. But um, I was naive enough to think that, and I was naive enough to uh, you know start tutorials. Luckily, I stopped at the very first tutorial. Um, but yeah, now like 8 years later, I just want to come here and fix some things which I said. Just a way, it's like a fun way of fixing the stupid things we do as kids. Okay, so this is the video. I will share it with sound so that you can also see it. Oh my god, that intro is loud. Okay.
Download this IDE from this website, visualstudio.com.
Yeah, that's fine. Let's just go where we start with the coding. Yeah. So it looks like I'm selecting Visual C Sharp. That's fine. Whenever you're trying to create a visual, like a C Sharp project, you generally use Visual Studio as your IDE because C Sharp is best paired with Visual Studio. If you're using C Sharp with anything else, so I know like IntelliJ offers solution for C Sharp as well. I think that's good. If you're using something like if you're using some if you're like for example, if you're using a lightweight code like editor, for example, a VS Code, or let's say you're using Vim or Sublime, whatever you want to use. And if you think you can get away with using C Sharp using one of these, you will face a lot of challenges down the line. So I think if you want the best experience for C Sharp, just go with one of the IDs like Visual Studio. Anyway, now the mistake
Selection
is,
menu, just click on Windows from application.
yeah, that's the first mistake I made in the tutorial. So if you are going to learn how to, for example, how to code or stuff like that, like if you're starting, right? If you're starting to code, never start with something like a like Windows Form application. Never use complex. Uh, what is it called? Never use complex project types. Yeah, or architect. So never start with Windows Form application. Yeah, I should have gone with something like a console application. So I think there should be a console app option should have been there on the top of the screen. Let me just see if I can get that. Yeah, console application. You could have used the console application. So not a pair.
Yeah, that's Visual Studio. Um, so let's click on Visual C Sharp, and under this,
I think I scrolled by quite fast. There should be something.
so let's click on Visual C Sharp, and under
Yeah, console application. You see it right there. It's right there. Just start with something like console application. Anyway, um, so you don't have to run into all these like complex structures like forms and then the logic behind the form, how they are working and all that stuff. Again, these are things you should not be concerned if you're starting to code, right?
text tool window. It says font, and you can also change the
Again, see, I was using labels and buttons, not a good like example for the first thing you're trying to learn, like starting to when you're starting to learn. So don't use these.
enter.
Okay, so I think we will be talking about, not we as in I was talking about two kinds of variables, that's and boolean string and boolean, although that's like kind of a misrepresentation because there are technically kind of five variables, that's integer, five or six actually, a floating point. So any decimal values would be a floating point variable, right? Then we have something called integer, floating point. We have our string. A string would be a set of characters. So technically, if I said characters before, you would have understood. But yeah, we have characters. So for example, A, B, C, D, E, F, or it can be a singular number. So it can be anything, but just one particular character is called a character. So a set of these characters would be called as a string. So we have, and then we have boolean. So technically, mostly when you're learning about like variables, you talk about these main five, and there's something one more called an object variable. So technically, what objects are and everything, that those should be covered under something called object-oriented programming. You have must have heard of it, like called OOPS. So I'm not going to be talking about this here. Now, integer has subtypes called long and then short and then byte. So again, these are again like some uh, subcategories of an integer type, and floating point would have something called float and double. So this has like a lower precision of decimals, and this has a higher precision of decimals. So based on what you want to use it, like you can. So this can be thought of like a set of characters, and this can be thought of like one singular character. And a boolean can only hold true and false value. So if you have done something called boolean algebra, you should be able to know what a true or false like what how booleans work. So technically, like if you go to the concept of computers, everything is like ones and zeros, binary. Like boolean is like a simple representation of that binary, but in the form of true and false. Um, yeah, if I go back to the video, not Visual Studio, but yeah, if I go back to the video,
name equals to. So
I think while
want
I
to start.
was creating the project, I talked about what these are, and over there I saw I was making a lot of mistakes with what they're.
Oh yes, and boolean. However, I won't go over the latter this video. So yeah, click on Visual Project, and a predefined value variable. That is, this video will be dealing with two sort of variable. That is a string and a boolean. A string has a predefined value or a defined value. I won't say predefined. It can be either predefined or it can be defined later or individually with functions.
Okay, so if you see here, I clearly have no idea of what I'm talking about. Hence, I kind of decided to make this like this iteration, like reiteration of this video as a way of just fixing my rubbish. So bear with me. Okay. So if I just talk about variables, right? So I have to give a real world example, so for example, we have containers, right? So containers can be anything. For example, in your house, you might have, for example, a box of chocolates. You might have, but what else can we have? So let's say, let's just take a kitchen example. So in the kitchen, we have like shakers for salt, we have shakers for pepper, like grounded pepper, obviously. We might have some other spices, for example, uh, turmeric. And where are you, like, so enough of examples. So where are you putting all these? These can be put into containers, right? So it can be put into, so a shaker would be a container. If you're putting turmeric, generally you don't put turmeric in shakers, you put them in like small boxes. So that would be a container, right? So a variable can be imagined as a container in the programming world, and the idea of a container is to store some value. So containers store value. So containers store items. Generally, containers store items. Now, if I have to translate this into programming, variables store value. Now, what that type of value is determined by the type of variable we are, like the type of container we are trying to call, right? So, for example, I was just saying a shaker will not be able to store turmeric. A shaker can only store salt or pepper. Similarly, let's say I have what can, so we generally have earphones, right? So now we have all these wireless earphones, and each earphone can only be put into the like respective, what do you call that, like charging box. So for example, if I have a set of AirPods, so based on the model, I can only put them to its respective charging box, right? So the charging box can be thought of as a container for my AirPods, right? So what is defining the type of item I can put? So this container defines the type of item I can put inside it. I cannot put an AirPod inside a shaker. I would not fill my charging box, my earphone charging box with salt or pepper, right? Those are illogical. Similarly, in programming, like I was saying about these variables, right? We would not store a set of characters inside an integer. Like I think we all know what integers are like. If we have the graph, we have heard of a set called Z, the set Z, which shows all integer values. What are integers? So integers can be anything, all whole numbers from negative infinity to positive infinity, and those are exclusive because, yeah, because infinity is a concept. Like it's just, if it's a concept, they are like exclusive. If it's like a solid number, for example, if it was like 10, it would have been inclusive. Anyway, let's not talk about maths right now. So, and the real plane, so this can be 1, this can be 2, this can be 3, this over here, the origin is always 0, this can be -1. So all these numbers are integers. So in an integer variable, obviously I'm going to store these integer values. I'm not going to be storing a set of characters. I won't store my name into an integer variable, right? That's the idea. Similarly, a floating point is just decimal value. So for example, 0.9, right? Or 0.17. These are all decimal values. I would not store them in an integer. Like for example, if I go back to a little bit of maths again, in this set, if the set is of integer, right, I do not expect a decimal value to exist in the set, right? So if my plane, or if my x-axis is all integers, I would not expect suddenly a 1.5 to exist in between a 1 and 2, right? So similarly, I would not expect an integer inside a float. I will only expect, uh, I would not expect a float inside an integer. But let's say my plane is of the real numbers. So real numbers consist of So real number is a set which is like going from negative infinity. Why am I writing 8? So negative infinity to infinity, right? And this can have decimal values. So I can expect 1, 2, 3 to be present in my real number set, as well as 2.5, as well as 1.5. So a float can have integer values, but it can also have these floating values, right? Now what long is, what short is, what byte is, you can talk about these later, but yeah, floating point again. So talking about a set of values, right, that should come to a string. I would not like like a set of characters, or like a phrase or a sentence or a name, like my name. I would not put it inside an integer or a float. I would have to put it inside a string. Similarly, a character, for example, A, just A, or just B, or just C, any of these. It can be a number as well. For example, 1 is a character. So in something, we have something called ASCII, as well as we have something called Unicode. So most languages are right now following Unicode. I have worked with Java these days. I work with Java these days, so Java follows Unicode, and that's like an expansion of ASCII, because ASCII only takes into consideration all the English languages, or languages like English characters. But we have other languages, right? We have Latin and we have Greek, and they might have different characters. So Unicode takes care of all the languages which are existing in this world. Even emojis, believe it or not, emojis are also taken care by Unicode. Um, Anyway, that's not the point. So as a singular character. So A, B, C, if it's a lambda, omega, alpha, whatever it is in the Greek language, everything will be taken care by this character variable. And finally, we have Boolean, which I talked about, will consist of only true and false. Anyway, let's see what I'm doing here.
However, I won't go over the latter. That is, I won't be showing how we can define a value of a string with different functions.
So I think I'm talking about getters and setters. Although I'm not quite sure if I knew about getters and setters back in the day. I'm just throwing, like whatever I saw in those copied codes, I'm just trying to make some sense out of it. That's all I'm doing here.
I will be just going over predefined. It cannot have values like number, text, anything like that. Whereas a string can have values like number and text.
Again, I think I say something like a boolean cannot have values like numbers and text, but I do not explain why, because I never go into the concept of containers. Containers, yeah. So if I do not explain, if I do not define my container, right, if I do not define my salt shaker, if I do not define my jar of cookies, if I do not define uh, you know for example, my box of chocolate, how will I able to explain that what it should hold, right? So I never define the containers, hence it so what I say here kind does not really make sense in my opinion. um okay, let's go. I think I waste a lot of time like resizing and adding stuff to this form. Again, if you it's for a first video, if I'm teaching someone, not the way to go. Again, so if you see private void button one underscore click, so this is like an interesting snake and camel case way. So again, I don't want to go into naming convention, but this is what C# follows whenever you try to create an like a function for your button clicks. Now, the reason I did not want to get into a complex like project type, for example, form like yeah, Windows Form applications, because then you have to explain what a object sender is, like what this object parameter does, what this event argument parameter does, what are the kinds of arguments we have to send with it. So we lead to these confusions, and I think sticking with a very simple project type, for example, console application, we can go like we don't have to worry about these. We can worry about this once we have the capability of understanding these. But if you can see, I'm setting the label as something. So I set the label as my name, and then okay. And I think I was checking the gender, and if the gender was not true, then I would say that I'm a female, and if the gender, I think if the gender is true, I will say I'm a male. Okay. Now, here's the thing about, again, although it should have been a like a video on variables, I have introduced something called if statements. Uh, Not the way to go, in my opinion. Let me just shrink this. Yeah. Okay, so I have introduced variable like if statements now, and if statements are basically um, controls the flow of your code. Now that's, no, I don't want to get into much. So basically, these are like logical operations you want to um, like introduce in your code so that the code knows what needs to be done. For example, if I have to go from city A to city B, I can take the train, I can take this like plane, I can decide to drive in my own car. All right. So what should be the best option over here is a logical operation I have to perform, right? I think the train can save me a lot of money. I don't have to worry about the cost of petrol or any kind of, diesel or whatever gas I'm using. For example, I can think the plane saves me a lot of time, right? If it is way away, right? A train might take 2 days to get me there, but a plane saves me a lot of time. But if I drive, I don't have to worry about like sticking to a particular schedule, right? I don't have to stick to the schedule of the train. I don't have to stick to the schedule of the flight. I can just take my own time and drive. So these are things I perform, and then I decide, okay, maybe the plane is the best way because I save time. It takes a little bit of money, but yeah, I save a lot of time on this. So if in a simple way, if else statement basically help you determine that. Okay, and whatever is inside this should return a value. So we perform conditional checks inside this if statements, and whatever is inside, if the condition is met to be true, for example, in my mind, if I say is train cheaper than flight, right? That's a logical thing to think, right? Is my flight fare going to be costlier than my train fare? Of course it will be, right? So it will return true. So that's the question. If it is true, if it is, yeah. So the answer is yes. Yes is basically like a synonym to true, right? So it's cheaper than flight. I can decide to select train. So that's an if statement. So the idea is the condition inside the if statement has to be met, or it has to be true for me to think about it. So selecting a train is a process I do if the answer to my question is yes, or if the answer to my question is true. If the answer to my question is false, I will just go into the next flow. That is my else if statement or my else statement. If anyone says, okay, you can go ahead, create videos on these. If they want to learn about it, I'm happy to take my time and teach them. But just like I said, this is a documentation process. I don't want to get into much into it. Uh, so yeah. So but the idea is, if it's true, right? I will execute this code block which is inside the if statement. If this is not true, I will check the condition inside the else if. If that's not true, I will just, so else does not come with a condition. So whatever is, like, if this is not met, this is not met, we will just simply execute the else block. Anyway, okay, here over here you will see a major error that I think is kind of stupid. Is we know the gender is of a boolean type, so this will always store a true or false, right? So why do I have to make a check whether it's true or not, right? I can just simply use this line of code, that is, if gender, then I execute something else. I don't even have to use else if, because what are the two values? Like, what are the count of values where like a boolean can hold? The count is always two, right? It's true slash false. It will never be. It will never be three. It will never be five. It will never be anything else. It will always be two. So if one of my, so think of it as a light switch, right? So if I say the light switch Okay, light switch, not just light switch. So let's say if I say the light switch is off, right? Okay, not like this. Light switch is not off. Okay, so would you check? This is the statement I give you. Like, hey, let's say I'm talking to my friend Adam, and I say, hey Adam, the light switch is not off. Would he ask me, like, oh, does that mean it's on? He won't ask me because a light switch can either be off or it can be on. It does not have any other position it can be in, right? So he will simply just go and switch off the light. Let's say it's a daytime and you want to save some electricity, he will just switch off the light. So that's the thing. So if this condition is false, do I really need to make sure that the other condition is true? That is, if the gender is false, right? If the gender is false, do I really have to check, oh, is the gender not true then? No, I don't. I know the gender is false. So I don't have to make an else if statement. That's what I'm doing in the code that I made 8 years ago. But yeah, the else if statement is not required. That's what I'm just trying to claim here. So that's pretty much, I think, what I was kind of concerned with. So all the mistakes I did in the video, I corrected it. I explained what truly variables are and what was the mistake with my if else statement. Uh, if you want to, so yeah, I was thinking of showing a piece of code as well, but I think I dragged this way too much. And the intention of this video, like I said, is not to really have a, this is not a tutorial exactly, it's just me just messing around a little. So anyway, thanks for watching this documentation. Sorry if I wasted some of your time, but yeah, see you next time.